Reviewing Penny Dreadful Season 1, Episode 6, What Death Can Bring Together using the tarot cards. This is the first time since Episode 1 that Vanessa Ives has actually bothered to do a tarot reading on anything, and the only reason she does it is because Sir Malcolm is kind of bullying her into it. They're trying to get some kind of lead on where Mina might be. She uses a 5-card draw, which I was a little less familiar with than the Celtic Cross or the standard 3-card draw that we use in these readings. As far as like the placement of all the cards go, she should have flipped over the center one, this one here, the top, the bottom, and then the final one. There are a couple of different ways to read a standard 5-card reading, but the way I think might be best to interpret it for the cards that we see on display is the center here is your present, the second card here is the immediate thing impacting you. These are your conscious intention and knowledge base, and this is the subconscious stuff hiding beneath the surface, and then over here is your overall outcome. It makes sense that Ives wants to know the unseen forces that are at work in their situation and then the overall outcome. She probably already knows about herself, what's impacting things, and she's obviously aware of all the conscious things that are going on. Ives does use a really interesting technique when she's reading these cards to get like a location instead of getting like a various meaning, which you can give every single one of the tarot cards some kind of interpretation for a place or time. You can also use them like to identify certain people, all kinds of more specific stuff like that if you want to do like a psychic reading. How I use tarot cards traditionally is to talk about archetypes and themes and sort of use them as a springboard. I did look it up, and the 5 of Cups that was down here is associated with water, so it being like a boat or an ocean wave sort of makes sense. And the Moon card also sort of makes sense to point towards some kind of boat situation because the moon controls the tides and they're in England with an ocean right there, so that's kind of all sort of indicating that in the mix. But what is interesting about that card pull is if you weren't reading it as a place and instead you were reading it more thematically, this also indicates like significant turmoil, depression, massive upset. Vanessa Ives at the end of the episode, also something these cards could be predicting for her at this moment. So I found it interesting that there were a couple different layered meanings. Today we will do a 5-card draw for this episode and just see what other little themes or insights we're going to talk about. The 3 of Bats, the 2 of Pumpkins, the 10 of Imps, the Emperor, which FYI, I guess that means we're not copying the tarot reading from the episode, and the Magician. Starting off with the 3 of Bats, this is a situation where being all heart is not necessarily a good thing, as we see each one of the bats is gripping a part of it and literally pulling it in different directions, ripping it apart. This is an interesting card to get inverted because its meaning right side up and upside down are pretty much the same. It's about significant emotional turmoil and struggle. The main difference you're going to find between its right side up and upside down form is right side up, it's going to end up being about an individual person going through like an immense trial. Where upside down, this is going to be like a shared trial, a shared loss, which is definitely interesting in Penny Dreadful, especially for this episode, because I would say tragic things happen to every single one of the characters. Ethan Chandler, because his is obviously going to be Brona, we can see that she is getting a lot sicker. He's trying to figure out how he can fund her medication, her pain management, all that kind of stuff. When he's talking about it with Sir Malcolm before they board the boat, Malcolm is talking about how this is definitely a death sentence. It's over for her before it's even really started, and like the best thing he can do for her is put her in a sanatorium. Ethan Chandler has always been about that personal touch and all that kind of stuff, so he is interested in taking care of her here at home where they can be together as long as possible, which I think is really sweet. He's such a hopeless romantic, but at the same time he also hasn't really spoken to Brona about any of this, and who knows what she would have preferred. With Sir Malcolm, he's suffering the loss of his one and only lead, Tamina, and with Vanessa Ives having less than reliable information, he's also kind of withdrawing from the group as a whole because he has that extra information about the myth of Amun-Ra and Amunet, and he's not sharing that with Vanessa Ives and by extension anyone else in the party. Victor Frankenstein here gets a mentor in Van Helsing only to have him violently ripped apart at the end of the episode by his first creation. And for me this was such a loss because Van Helsing could have dropped a lot of lore and information on us. I felt like he was highly underutilized in the episode, but at the same time if he had been too forthcoming or given like too much information away, we wouldn't have really had a journey to go on with these characters anymore. So I understand the decisions they made and why they made them, but as far as this card goes, it's sort of like a loss both for the audience with everything that Van Helsing could have contributed to the show, and also a loss for Victor Frankenstein himself because he definitely had someone who cared about him, who wanted him to confide in him, who might have even helped him with this monster issue. And to that end, it's also a little bit of a loss for the monster or the creature because Van Helsing probably would have ended up helping him too, and maybe even like working together to find the right candidate for his bride. And then of course Vanessa Ives is suffering the loss of Mina that's been pulling at her heart the whole time, and she doesn't know it, but she's being cut out of this search for her own good. She's actually opened herself up to like the evil that's within her and demonic possession, and through that she's like become repossessed and gone back to that hell, that quote unquote time of sickness that we just witnessed her struggle through in Closer Than Sisters. Two of Pumpkins here is signifying a duality, a this or that kind of situation, and in particular a person's desire to find balance between two diametrically opposed things or two specific kinds of decisions. Now generally speaking, right side up, this would be about weighing our choices, balancing decision making out, trying to figure out like the best solution, and like really taking our time and making sure everything works out correctly. But upside down, it is suggesting a hasty decision, a lack of consideration, an inability to balance. All of which makes this a really interesting card for this episode because the team is more split up than ever, each one of them sort of like chasing their own thing. We have the largest group being Sir Malcolm, Ethan Chandler, and Sembene going to research the boat and see if they can find the master there. And Sir Malcolm has like made the impulsive, intentional decision to split Vanessa Ives off from everyone else to sort of like pursue her own love life or whatever with Dorian Gray. There's no benefit to their larger mission for letting her do that. It's just a thing that he suggests she does, which should have made Vanessa suspicious, FYI, but I guess she's just so infatuated and happy to have found something for herself, she's going with it. Lastly, we have Victor Frankenstein partnering with Helsing to see if we can get more information about vampires and this blood disease, because he did suggest back in episode 4, I think it was, that he has significant experience with these creatures. We never really got to hear what that experience was. Unfortunately, dividing and conquering really doesn't work for the group at this point in time. While Sir Malcolm, Ethan Chandler, and Sembene do make it all out of this quarantine ship alive, they don't have any more information, they don't have any new leads, they have no real hope. I think Victor Frankenstein might have got an off-screen lore drop from Helsing, but it's not anything he ever ends up sharing with the group. It's not something that even viewers are privy to. We get just like a little taste fan service of who Helsing is and what he's been doing in life. And Vanessa Ives' Dalian should have been her ability to like step back into society, sort of like find a life for herself outside of like her illness, her struggles with possession, all this kind of stuff. She's talking about how important her self-control is, how there are some things that are within her she can never let out. And it seems specifically like the hasty decision not only to connect with Dorian Gray but to stay with him the night and have sex with him is what like released that possession from within her and left us in the state where we no longer have Vanessa Ives for help. Which brings us over to the 10 of Imps, and this is a card about greed. Igor here, he desires all of the things and he's trying to carry them with him, but like as we can see, it's more than he needs and more than he can take, because he's already like dropped one of the imps on the ground and all these guys are very precariously held, so it's unlikely that he can make use of all the resources that he has at his disposal. It's possible that he not only doesn't need these things, but he doesn't even have a use for them. He's just hoarding for the sake of it and like withholding information, being selfish, trying to keep things all for himself. And an interesting reading for me for this card is going to be about people like hoarding their own secrets and their own information. Van Helsing in this episode tells Frankenstein a lot, but he makes Frankenstein promise to never tell Sir Malcolm Murray this information. So that makes me think like maybe he actually did tell him quite a bit of information that both audiences and Malcolm are never aware of. This is just like Frankenstein holding on to that and doing nothing with it really. In those conversations with Frankenstein and Helsing, Helsing tries to get Frankenstein to open up, reveal what's troubling him. Frankenstein is so tempted by, but he doesn't actually take the bait. In like withholding that information, he loses his opportunity to get help with the creature. The most obvious example we can see here about someone sort of like hoarding secrets or knowledge is going to be Sir Malcolm, and how he's sort of like pushing Vanessa Ives to go back into society and do like frivolous woman things and not really warning her about the danger she's in, or like why this creature might want her or have taken Mina as a lure to get her closer. And I do think that like Igor, who's so focused on trying to take all of these things and keep it for himself, he's not really focused on where he's going, what he's gonna do with this stuff, all of those important parts about having resources and using them wisely. Our characters are so focused on keeping those secrets with them and hiding them from the others. They're not really considering what they can do with those secrets in the future, where they're going right now, all that kind of information. A more subconscious, hidden influence is going to be the Emperor. This signifies leadership, usually a male leadership role, taking domination, taking responsibility for the situation overall. I think an easy way to read this might again tie us back into Sir Malcolm Murray, because he is taking charge and pushing ahead to find Mina no matter what. Even from the beginning of the episode, he is pushing Vanessa Ives to do a tarot reading, to find more information out, to get them another lead, not to wait for the intuition to sort of come to her. And this is to like a more masculine hunting, seeking kind of role, instead of like Ives's natural tendency to just wait for the intuition to strike. Really again sort of like coming back into duality like we saw displayed here in the Two of Pumpkins. But I think there are subtle ways we can see this sort of leadership taking over and taking control too. Van Helsing is in his own way asserting control over various bits of information and how it's best to handle the vampire situation, and everyone's like learning about various bits of information, and he's doing it out of perceived kindness. He feels that like Malcolm Murray learning all this information would break his heart, but at the same time he is taking responsibility, taking charge, and sort of like trying to steer the ship a very specific way. And even in some of the B-plot stuff, like Ethan Chandler is trying to figure out what to do for Brona going forward. He hasn't really fully consulted her, seen what she wants to do, what she feels about things, but he does want to make sure she's comfortable, she's taken care of, she can stay here at home. This is probably sort of like a loving male patriarchy, dominance, control, protection kind of thing that all relates back to the positive traits here in the Emperor. I think even a little bit what what we're seeing with Vanessa Ives, where she seems to be trying to take control of her own life back. It's been like overthrown by this possession, this experience she had as a child, where she witnessed Sir Malcolm and her mother having an affair, and that kind of let this evil in, and then she sort of continued to nurture the evil. She's overcome that, defeated it, here on a mission of self-sacrifice and self-denial to kind of like save her best friend Mina. But in this episode in specific, she's also trying to like take the reins back of her own life, take control, find a place for her and a future for her in English society, potentially with Dorian Gray. We know that doesn't go well for her, but she's also taking responsibility for that decision by suffering the possession of this evil, and this evil like reclaiming her body and like taking domination over it, leading us into the Magician card as a final outcome. And this is sort of like an interesting pick for this specific episode because the Magician card is something that speaks to creative interpretation, creative drive, inspiration, sort of like building something new and unique, valuing the art, as it were. And to get maybe a little bit too meta on this card reading right here, I probably see the Magician more as like the showrunners taking artistic creativity and liberty with these characters and the setup they've built so far. Penny Dreadful is a mix of public domain, famous literary characters, and original characters in an original environment of Victorian London. A lot of the public domain characters have been performing in sort of expected roles. Killing Van Helsing off when he could have been so helpful was a surprising, unexpected twist for this show. Returning to Vanessa Ives' possession when we just watched her undergo the possession in Closer Than Sisters, but we're actually coming back to it now to get like a full circle catharsis is like a creative, intriguing sort of premise. And I think showing the master on the boat the same way that Dracula came to London on a boat too is sort of like a fun little Easter egg, especially to see that in the same episode that we lose Van Helsing. But to me, this is a point where like the showrunner sort of takes some of the expected, projected things and run it off the rails on us, because now Vanessa Ives can't lead anyone anywhere. She's in the middle of being possessed, and she's more a liability than she is helpful. Van Helsing, who seemed like was going to be a strong ally, is gone. The creature is pushing up the timeline, so whether or not Frankenstein is going to be able to be helpful to them at all or available is sort of up in the air. As is Ethan Chandler's role right now, if we're going to be 100%, because maybe he's going to be too busy with Brona right now, so that sort of leaves like Sir Malcolm isolated on this island. And this is the episode where Sembene introduces the idea that Sir Malcolm might have to kill Mina when they meet her, or like sometimes there's no saving people or getting them back. And that's directly after we watched in episode 5 that Vanessa Ives believes Sir Malcolm is incapable of sacrificing Mina. He's willing to get her back at any cost, but he's not willing to kill her for her like own freedom or to maintain some sense of who she was before or what she was before. Introducing that kind of conflict between Vanessa and Sir Malcolm and immediately pushing back and challenging that and trying to like force Sir Malcolm to make a different decision is an interesting choice, like already sort of pushing us into a full circle loop, kind of like setting up and foreshadowing some more elements that might be dark down the line. This reading as a whole is one that I would think would be very Gothic in nature. Starting out with like an issue that's rending everyone's heart, that's cutting into them, making them feel extreme pain and emotiveness is always like a great Gothic agony way to sort of lean into that. And then talking about how duality, specifically the push and pull, like the lure into something desirable and then like getting close to it and realizing that it's actually repulsive, is both a vampiric draw and a Gothic draw. And I think we see this balance really well in this episode, because we can see with Vanessa Ives, like the reason she's sensitive to things, the reason she has this intuition and foreknowledge is because of her possession, because she is more able to intuit. But at the same time, that's the reason she's possessed. That's the reason the evil wants her. It's the reason all of this is happening, like even at all, with like consciously trying to keep secrets and to be less communicative, less community oriented, but at the same time wanting to sort of like take leadership and do the right thing, which is sort of suggesting like even though we can recognize this as selfishness, it's done with the best of intentions here in the bottom. Like that's the underlying undercurrent. It's not mean or cruel, unfortunately. It's like done hopefully to help people, and all of which is leading us into like this art, this high creativity, this love of good storytelling. And that's going to be most of my thoughts here in episode 6. Overall, it was a great episode. I do think episode 5, Closer Than Sisters, is still my favorite, but this is definitely ramping us up and pushing us and keeping a great sense of tension and stakes for the finale that's just 2 episodes away. But talk to me in those comments down below. What did you think of this episode? What do you think of this reading for this episode? Are there other aspects of the show that I'm missing that we should be trying to cover? I would love to hear any and all of that in the comments down below. And as always, keep reading.